The sun hovered over a crumbling stretch of desert road, casting long shadows across the barbed wire fence that separated what remained of the United States from the uncertain lands beyond. Once known as the southern border, this narrow zone was now called the Edge, the final barrier holding back the infected from spilling into what little remained of organized resistance. Lieutenant Mara Quinn adjusted her dusty tactical vest as the wind howled, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. She stood atop the watchtower of Outpost A9, the southernmost border fortification still under human control. The outpost had been silent for 3 days. No new refugees. No supply drops. And worst of all, no radio contact from command. Below her, a ragtag unit of survivors and soldiers worked tirelessly, fortifying what was left of their perimeter. The infected hadn't reached them in full force yet, not here, but there were whispers among the troops. Whispers that the outbreak was no longer just spreading northward. Something was coming from the other side of the border, something fast, intelligent, and worse than what they'd faced before. Mara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the horizon. A plume of dust rose in the distance. Vehicle approaching, she called into her radio. The gate crew scrambled into position. The Humvee that rolled into view was beaten, blackened by fire, and covered in dents. It came to a jerking halt in front of the gate, its engine wheezing. From the driver's side, a man stumbled out, hands raised high. He wore a makeshift border patrol uniform, but it was ripped and splattered with dried mud. "I'm Captain Raul Mendoza," he shouted. "From Outpost C4. You have to let me in, we were overrun." Mara rushed down to meet him. C4 was 80 miles east of here. It fell 3 weeks ago. "I escaped through the tunnels," Mendoza said, breathing hard. "There's something you need to see. Something I brought back. It's in the vehicle. It's not human anymore." The moment he said it, every guard nearby reached for their weapons. Mara held up her hand. "Stand down. Open the back." Mendoza nodded grimly and unlatched the vehicle's cargo doors. Inside, strapped with chains and sedatives, was a creature that once had the shape of a man, but its bones had shifted, its eyes glowed faintly, and its jaw looked unhinged. Unlike normal infected, it wasn't thrashing or snarling. It was watching. "What is that?" a soldier whispered. "It's a variant," Mendoza said. "We thought the infection was mutating, but we were wrong. These things aren't from here. They're coming from across the border. South. And they're organized." Mara stared at the creature. For a brief moment, its eyes locked with hers, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "If that's true," she said, "then everything we've done to contain this outbreak is about to fall apart." That night, the outpost was tense. Mendoza was debriefed in the command tent while the chained variant was placed under constant surveillance. Scientists in hazmat suits began running quiet tests, but the data was slow. Mara reviewed reports. Strange sightings along the southern deserts. Entire towns vanishing overnight. Distress signals intercepted in languages not heard in months, dialects from far south, deep into Central and South America. And then there was the classified memo Mendoza handed her, satellite images showing movement, coordinated, massive herds, traveling north. At midnight, the power surged. Lights flickered. Alarms blared. Then came the shriek. Not a zombie growl. A call. A signal. The chained variant had woken. And it wasn't alone. Explosions rocked the perimeter as small packs of infected struck from the shadows. But these weren't the mindless, staggering corpses Mara's team was used to. These were agile. Tactical. Communicating with gestures. Moving as a unit. Within minutes, the perimeter was breached. Mara fired into the night, shouting orders. "Sector 3! Hold your line!" But it was too late. The edge had been compromised. And beyond the smoke and the blood, Mara could see more figures approaching from the south, tall, fast-moving silhouettes, lit only by the burning fence line. They weren't just infected. They were scouts. Something, or someone, had sent them ahead. Whatever lay beyond the border wasn't just the origin of the outbreak. It was the key to ending it, or dooming what was left of the world. Smoke curled into the night sky as what remained of Outpost N9 burned behind them. Lieutenant Mara Quinn led the survivors down a narrow canyon path, their flashlights dimmed, steps hushed. The border fence had collapsed hours earlier, leaving the once secure facility in ruin. Of the 37 station personnel, only 12 made it out alive. Among them was Captain Raul Mendoza, his arm bandaged from a scrape during the escape. He walked silently beside Mara, eyes constantly darting toward the darkened hills to the south. "We can't go back," Mara said, breaking the silence. "We won't survive going forward either," replied Corporal Nix, a sharp-eyed scout with a sniper rifle slung over her shoulder. "We don't even know what's out there." "That's exactly why we have to go," Mara said firmly. "That variant in the vehicle, it wasn't just infected. It was planning. We need to know what we're really up against." Mendoza finally spoke. "There's a place. 60 miles into the borderlands, an abandoned research facility. It was called Site X. Before the fall, there were rumors it was built for testing bioweapons. Locals believe the outbreak may have started there, or at least mutated there." Mara narrowed her eyes. "And you know how to get us there?" "I mapped the smuggler trails when I was stationed near C4, Mendoza nodded. "But if Site X still exists, it's not just the undead we'll have to worry about." They set out at first light, moving through the hushed silence of the desert. The air grew thicker with each mile they put between themselves and the ruins of Outpost A9. Vultures circled overhead. Animal tracks vanished mid-trail. Even the wildlife seemed to have fled southward. By noon, the group came across a small village, charred rooftops, shattered windows, and absolute stillness. The sign hanging from a crooked pole read, "Bienvenidos a San Torres." "Keep your weapons ready," Mara ordered. The team split into formation and moved through the empty streets. There were no bodies. No blood. Just silence. Mendoza walked beside her, his face pale. "I've seen infected destroy whole cities," he whispered. "But I've never seen them clean up after." They reached the church in the town's center. Inside, under cracked stained glass, was a message scrawled on the wall in red paint, "IT lives below." Before anyone could speak, a loud mechanical clank echoed beneath their feet, followed by a rumbling. The ground shook. Suddenly, the wooden floor near the altar split open, and a hidden elevator platform rose upward, sparking with age. Everyone drew their weapons. "What the hell is this?" Nix muttered. Mendoza stepped forward slowly. This wasn't here before." From the elevator, a figure emerged, human, but barely. A man in tattered tactical gear, face gaunt, eyes bloodshot. He raised both hands in peace. "You're not supposed to be here," he rasped. Mara approached him cautiously. "Who are you?" The man looked her over. "Name's Dr. Elias Crane. I worked at Site X before it was sealed. I escaped 2 years ago, came here to warn others. But no one listened." "Warn them about what?" Mendoza asked. Crane's face tightened. "The outbreak you've been fighting up north? That was just the overflow. The real infestation started at Site X, when they opened the pit. The infected down there, they've evolved. Some aren't even dead anymore. There's something else." Mara felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. "We need to get to Site X." Crane shook his head. "Then you'd better prepare for war. Because what lies beyond the border isn't spreading by accident. Something is guiding them. And it wants across." The wind outside picked up. A deep growl echoed from the village outskirts. Then came the howls, not like wolves, not like infected. Something new. Something hunting. Crane's eyes went wide. "They've found me again. Run." Without hesitation, Mara ordered, "Fall back. Everyone move." The survivors sprinted from the church as the first of the new variants emerged from the shadows, sleek, sinewy figures with spines like armor and glowing veins. They didn't stagger. They charged. Gunfire erupted. Screams rang through the ruins. But this time, the undead weren't chasing to feed. They were chasing to stop them. And as Mara ran, her mind raced. If this was just the outskirts, what awaited them at Site X? The sun was barely rising when the survivors left the ruined village behind, their footsteps urgent and weapons loaded. The new variants had vanished into the shadows as quickly as they'd appeared, as if satisfied with a warning rather than a kill. But the message was clear: they were being watched. Mara moved at the front of the group with Mendoza and Dr. Elias Crane close behind. The rest followed in tight formation. Everyone was on edge. Why didn't they finish us off? Corporal Nix muttered, her voice low. Crane didn't turn around. They don't always kill. Not right away. The evolved ones, they analyze. Observe. And sometimes, they mark. Mark for what? Nix asked sharply. But Crane gave no answer. The terrain grew harsher with every mile. Cracked highways gave way to dense brush and jagged hills. By midday, they reached an old gas station crushed under a collapsed overpass. Mara called for a halt. It was the last rest stop before the deep borderlands, the zone known only on old maps as Sector Null. As the team scavenged supplies, Mara sat with Crane near the rusted skeleton of a gas pump. I need to know what we're walking into, she said, her tone calm but firm. Crane ran a hand over his hollow face. Site X was a bioresearch lab buried beneath a dormant mountain. It was off the books. No one knew what we were working on, not even most of the staff. I was one of 3 lead researchers cleared for pit protocols. Mara's eyes narrowed. Pit protocols? He nodded grimly. A massive underground chamber. Natural. Prehistoric. We discovered it during drilling. Inside, there were spores. Fossilized tissue. Ancient, but reactive. We should have sealed it. Instead, they tested it on the infected. That's when things changed. Intelligence. Coordination. Mutation. You're telling me this wasn't a virus, she asked. It was, Crane replied. But the virus was just a tool, something ancient hijacked it. Something we woke up. A tense silence followed until Mendoza stepped in from the shadows. Movement to the east. We're not alone. Within minutes, the team packed up and moved on. They descended into a thick gulch, where the air grew humid and buzzing insects filled the silence. The deeper they went, the less the terrain resembled anything American. It was as if the land itself had changed, reclaimed by something old and feral. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the rear of the group. Private Lang was gone. Only his rifle remained, snapped clean in two. Blood trailed off into the thicket, but there was no sign of a body. Ambush formation. Mara barked. Before anyone could react, a figure dropped from the trees. It wasn't undead, it was alive. A young woman in tribal gear, eyes fierce, holding a crude spear made of steel and bone. She whistled sharply, and more emerged from the trees. Mara raised her weapon instinctively. Identify yourself. The woman spoke in heavily accented English. Lower your weapons. You don't belong here. Neither do the monsters, Mara growled. The woman stared at her. We've been fighting them long before your border ever fell. Crane stepped forward. You're from the resistance. The jungle militia. I thought you were all wiped out. We adapt, she said coldly. Unlike your armies. Follow me. You'll die out here otherwise. The group had no choice but to follow. The militia led them through a winding, narrow ravine until they reached a hidden valley cloaked in dense green, a secret village of survivors, warriors, and ancient traditions. Their leader, a scarred man known only as Commander Torres, waited beside a sacred fire. Torres looked Mara over with tired eyes. Americans. You finally come south, and only now realize what you were truly facing. We came to stop it, Mara said. To find Site X. Torres shook his head. Then you walk into the grave of the world. He pointed to a nearby cliff wall. Symbols were carved in stone, twisted humanoid shapes with black eyes and open mouths. The infection did not begin here. It was called here, Torres said. Summoned by greed. It woke, it fed, and now it seeks to return. If Site X is your goal, you'll need more than guns. Mendoza stepped forward. Then tell us what we need. Torres stared at him. You need to survive the next 12 miles. Through the zone they control completely. No light. No sound. And no mercy. Mara glanced at her tired, bloodied team. 12 miles through the heart of enemy territory. And they weren't even at the mountain yet. 12 miles. That was all that lay between Mara's unit and the facility known as Site X. But those 12 miles passed through a cursed region the locals called La Zona Negra, the Black Zone. By sunrise, they were ready. Commander Torres had given them supplies, cloaks woven to dampen heat signatures, boots that muffled sound, and herbal paste that masked human scent. Ancient tools to face a modern nightmare. This isn't a fight you win with firepower, Torres warned as they departed. In the Black Zone, the infected don't hunt by sight. They listen. They feel. One wrong breath, one metal click, and they will swarm. Crane adjusted his gear nervously. How many have crossed it? Torres didn't hesitate. None. The jungle swallowed them whole within the hour. Thick, dark, and unnaturally quiet, even the birds avoided this place. Mara led the team in a staggered line, motioning every few feet to halt and listen. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was predatory. 3 hours in, the first of the strange sights began. They passed a twisted tree wrapped in something like webbing, but the strands pulsed slowly, like veins under skin. Inside the cocoon hung a human skeleton, fused to the bark. The entire group paused. Mendoza gritted his teeth and turned away. This isn't rot, Crane whispered. It's assimilation. Mara frowned. Meaning? Crane's face was pale. They're not just killing anymore. They're absorbing. Learning from us. They pushed forward, avoiding open ground, stepping only where the scouts marked safe paths. But just before dusk, as shadows deepened and their nerves frayed, a low thrum began beneath their feet. Private Dorsey held up a trembling hand. Do you hear that? It was like a heartbeat, deep and rhythmic, rising from the earth. Crane turned toward Mara, terrified. We're above a nest. No sooner had he spoken than the ground erupted. A swarm burst from beneath, not the shuffling undead they were used to, but sleek, black-skinned creatures with jointed limbs and eyeless faces. They moved like a single organism. Mara shouted, no sound. Retreat in formation, no shooting. But Private Yates panicked. He fired a burst into the swarm. It was a death sentence. The noise brought dozens more, hundreds, crashing through the brush, walls of infected flooding the trees. The forest seemed to breathe with them. Every movement coordinated. Every strike calculated. The team ran. Mendoza dragged a wounded soldier while Nix threw silent flares coated in repellent paste to confuse the swarm. Crane hurled a vial of flammable sap behind them, igniting a slow-burning chemical fire, just enough to create smoke, not enough to attract more attention. But the creatures were still gaining. They burst through a narrow ravine and spotted a collapsed pipeline ahead. The only way through was under it. In there. Mara pointed. The team crawled through single file, breath held as the swarm thundered past overhead, mere inches above them. One of the creatures stopped, its clawed foot tapping the pipe slowly. Mendoza held his knife at the ready, trembling. But then, the creature turned, and vanished with the rest. 10 minutes passed before anyone dared to breathe again. When they emerged on the other side, it was night. The moon barely lit the jungle. Their numbers had thinned again, Dorsey and Yates were gone. Taken in the panic. The survivors collapsed in a silent clearing. No fire. No talking. Just exhaustion. Then, from the darkness, a voice. You crossed the black zone. You're either foolish, or chosen. Weapons snapped up instantly. A tall figure stepped into the moonlight, cloaked in animal hides, face painted with black soot. He looked human. But something in his eyes shimmered unnaturally. Crane whispered, "He's one of them." "No," the man said calmly. "I'm what they couldn't consume. The first test subject. I escaped Site X 20 years ago. And now, I've returned to end what they began." Mara rose slowly. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "I'm the key to what lies beneath Site X." The man called himself Jonas Creed, a name that stirred something deep in Dr. Elias Crane's memory. As the group huddled in the clearing under the cover of thick jungle and silence, Crane spoke first. "You were part of Project Genesis." Creed nodded. "I was Genesis." Mara didn't lower her rifle. "Start talking." Creed sat cross-legged on a moss-covered log, unbothered by the weapons pointed at him. His presence was unsettling, not aggressive, but unnaturally calm, as if he'd long transcended human fear. "I volunteered 20 years ago. Back when Site X was just a theory, a hidden facility built to experiment on viral evolution. They were trying to control a specific strain of the virus that came from beneath the earth, something ancient. Something we shouldn't have touched." He gestured toward Crane. "This one only saw the late stages. I was there when the origin was found." Crane swallowed hard. "The pit." "Yes," Creed said. "An underground biological anomaly. The pit wasn't a cave. It was a living organism, part of a larger network we never mapped. The spores we found inside were only the beginning. They weren't just dormant, they were waiting." Mendoza frowned. "Waiting for what?" "To connect," Creed said. "To spread. The virus wasn't meant to kill us, it was meant to convert us. The infected are part of a growing neural network, like a fungus with a single consciousness. Every zombie you've ever fought? It's the same entity, experiencing reality through thousands of bodies." The team was silent. "Site X wasn't just a lab," Creed continued. "It was a gateway. The scientists thought they could isolate the organism. Study it. Maybe even weaponize it. But they misunderstood. The moment they began human trials, the infection adapted. And then it began to learn. I was the first human it bonded with, but I survived because I resisted. I never fully joined the network." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Then how are you still alive?" Creed smiled faintly. "I've lived in the black zone for years. The organism still sees me as part of it. A broken node, one it can't quite delete. That's why I can guide you through the last leg of this." Nix crossed her arms. "Why help us now?" "Because I know how this ends," Creed said. "The network is changing. Adapting faster than ever. The new variants, the ones you saw, they're part of a second phase. If we don't destroy the neural core buried beneath Site X, the infection will evolve into something we won't recognize. Something we can't fight." Mara still didn't trust him, but time was running out. And his knowledge might be the only advantage they had. By morning, they were moving again. Creed led them through narrow game trails no map recorded, avoiding old CDC quarantine fences and shattered military outposts. The land was littered with signs of past failures, burned vehicles, long dead bodies, and makeshift barricades overrun years ago. Around midday, they reached a steep ridge. Beyond it, hidden beneath layers of rock and jungle, was the outer wall of Site X. It had collapsed in on itself during the first outbreak. Vines now covered rusted steel doors. Creed knelt and traced a pattern in the dirt. "This is the old entrance. Locked since the breach. But I know another way." He led them along a stone path behind a waterfall and revealed a sealed shaft door, overgrown and half-buried. The keypad was cracked, but Creed produced a rusted keycard and pressed it to the sensor. The door hissed open. Inside, the air was cold and metallic. Lights flickered on, one by one, revealing a narrow passage into the darkness. As they entered, a whisper echoed through the corridor, not from Creed, not from any of them. It was inside their heads. A chorus of voices. Male, female, young, old, all speaking the same word. Welcome. Crane froze. It knows we're here. Creed turned to them, his expression hardening. From this point forward, it'll test us. Show us what it thinks we fear. Remember, it doesn't just want your body. It wants your mind. Mara checked her weapon and stepped forward. Then we make sure it doesn't get either. They descended the first flight of stairs, unaware that something had already awakened deeper inside. And it was waiting. The descent into Site X was like stepping into a memory, one not their own. The deeper Mara's team went, the stranger things became. Hallways lit themselves without power. Broken security cameras tracked their movement. Cold air pushed against their skin, like the building was breathing. This place isn't abandoned, Crane murmured, eyes darting. It's alive. They moved through levels labeled observation, containment, and splice labs. Every corridor was stained with history, bullet holes in walls, blood smears on doors, shattered glass embedded in the floor. It looked like a war zone, but there were no bodies. Where are the remains? Mendoza whispered. Creed answered darkly. Absorbed. Their goal lay several levels below, the neural core, the original infection source the lab had tried to harness. Creed believed it still pulsed underground, feeding psychic energy into the hive above. If they could destroy it, the entire network could collapse. But as they passed through the neural interface chamber, the air changed. Heavier. Charged. Mara stopped. Her flashlight flickered, and in that moment of darkness, she saw something impossible. Her brother. He stood at the end of the corridor, dressed in military gear, smiling. He had died 5 years ago. Matthew, she whispered, lowering her weapon. Mara, the figure said. You left me. But I forgive you. Crane shouted, don't move. It's not real. But the illusion was already breaking the team apart. Mendoza dropped to his knees, sobbing in Spanish, staring at a ghost of his mother. Nick stumbled away, clutching her head. They're in my mind. I can't tell what's real. The infected weren't attacking physically, they were assaulting their minds. The hive was using their memories, their guilt, their fear. Creed shouted above the chaos, it's the psychic field. The closer we get, the stronger its influence. Focus on each other. Not what you see. Mara blinked and looked again, her brother was gone. In his place, a decayed husk twitched, jaw hanging open, eyes burning with violet light. She fired. The echo snapped the others from their visions. Crane injected Mendoza with a suppressant to stabilize his mind. Nix gritted her teeth and rejoined the group, trembling but alert. Whatever this thing is, Mara said, it doesn't want us to reach it. They moved fast after that, ignoring the whispers and hallucinations. They used rope to lower themselves down a collapsed shaft that bypassed the main stairwell. At the bottom, a reinforced blast door, half open, sparking with static energy. Behind it lay the core chamber. The walls were lined with organic material, a pulsing mass of tissue fused with steel and computer panels. Tendrils ran through the floor and ceiling like roots. At the center, a massive orb of shifting light and flesh floated above a platform. It pulsed in sync with their heartbeats. This is it, Creed said. The neural core. The beginning. Crane set his pack down and pulled out a containment disruptor, a device meant to overload energy fields. If I can get close enough to plant this at the base, it'll burn out the psychic link. Mara scanned the chamber. And the catch? Creed looked at her grimly. The moment it senses a threat, it'll summon every infected within miles. From the black zone. From the jungle. From every nest. It will defend itself. Nix exhaled sharply. Then we'll hold them off. Mendoza loaded the last of their ammo. For how long? As long as it takes, Mara said. We end this now, or we never leave. As Crane moved toward the core, a low rumble began to rise beneath their feet. Dozens of flesh-crafted drones spilled from side corridors, not just zombies, but hybrid creatures, insectal limbs, distorted skulls, armored with bone and wired metal. They moved fast, eyes glowing. The fight had begun. Mara, Nix, and Mendoza held the line, bullets flying, blades slashing. Creed moved with inhuman precision, intercepting the fastest creatures and breaking them apart with terrifying strength. Crane reached the platform, but a tendril wrapped around his leg, yanking him off his feet. The core opened an eye. A real eye. Human. Crane screamed as images flooded his mind, memories that weren't his, scientists experimenting, test subjects dying, Creed screaming inside a glass tube as the infection bonded to him. It was showing him the truth. But he resisted. He planted the disruptor. The timer blinked. 5 minutes. The disruptor's countdown began, 4:59. 4:58, 4:57. Crane stumbled back from the core, gasping, blood dripping from his nose. The neural link had almost consumed him, but he'd seen something vital. A weakness. A memory embedded in the hive's history. There's a nerve cluster at the top of the core, he shouted to the others. If it senses direct threat to it, it will focus everything on defense. That's our window to keep it busy. But there was no time for debate. A flood of horrors was coming down the corridor. Not walkers, not even runners, mutated enforcers, creatures armored in spiked bone, with exposed muscles pulsating under blackened skin. Their jaws split sideways, revealing inner rows of sharp teeth, and their eyes burned violet like the core's. Mara barked orders as she reloaded. Mendoza, Nix, hold the right flank. Creed, cover the left. Crane, stick to the platform. You go down, the whole plan does too. The first wave hit them like a tidal force. Nix lobbed a frag grenade down the hallway. It exploded mid-air, sending limbs and bone shards flying. But more came. Dozens more. Then hundreds. The walls echoed with the hive's growl. Mara fired non-stop, her rifle overheating as she took down a charging brute. Creed launched himself into the horde, moving with unnatural grace, snapping necks and crushing spines. He didn't fight like a man, he fought like something the hive had made and then rejected. Mendoza was hit. A slashing claw tore through his side. He dropped to one knee, screaming in pain, but kept firing. Don't let them through. The core responded to the resistance by lashing out. Tendrils burst from the walls, stabbing toward the survivors. One caught Nix by the arm, lifting her off the ground. Mara shot the tendril clean in two, dropping her hard. 30 seconds. Crane shouted. It's drawing all power inward to stop the overload. Then suddenly. Silence. The infected stopped. Every creature froze in place, twitching slightly, their heads all turning at once, toward Creed. He stood still, staring back at them. They're calling me in, he whispered. They still think I'm part of the hive. Mara's eyes widened. Then don't fight it. Creed turned to her. You don't understand. If I let them in, I won't come back. But I can draw them in. All of them. Nix was bleeding badly. Mendoza could barely stand. Mara clenched her jaw. If you go in there. It's the only way, Creed interrupted. You all get out. When the timer hits 0, this place goes down, and I go with it. Before she could respond, he walked calmly into the horde. They parted for him. Creed climbed the core's platform and looked directly into its pulsing eye. You made me. But I'm ending you. Tendrils wrapped around him, but he didn't resist. He let them take him. The eye dilated, confused. Then it pulsed violently, waves of psychic energy flooding the chamber. All around, the infected screamed, a shriek of betrayal and collapse. The timer ticked. 0:04. 0:03. Mara grabbed Crane and Mendoza. Move! Out the shaft, now! Nix fired one last shot before retreating with them. They sprinted up the broken ladder, ducking falling debris and sparks. Below, Creed's last words echoed in their minds, not as a whisper, but as a command. Burn it down. The disruptor detonated. A flash of white. Then, silence. The hive screamed once more, then went quiet. For the first time in years, the psychic hum across the infected broke like shattered glass. Outside, the jungle shook as a shockwave blasted through the trees. Birds scattered. Animals fled. And the horde? They fell. Across the black zone, across miles of infected land, zombies collapsed where they stood. Some twitched. Others simply stopped moving. Mara, Crane, Nix, and a bleeding Mendoza emerged from the trees, eyes squinting into the sun. The air felt different. Lighter. Free. Crane knelt and placed his hand on the soil. It's over. The neural link is broken. But Mara knew the cost. Creed was gone. And though the hive had fallen, the scars it left on the world would never heal completely. The forest was quiet now. No screams, no growls, no buzzing whispers from the hive. Just the rustle of leaves in the wind and the rhythmic crunch of boots on soil. Mara led the group out of the black zone, her rifle slung over her shoulder, her uniform stained with blood and ash. Behind her, Crane supported Mendoza, whose side was still bandaged tight. Nix followed, silent, haunted. They had survived. But they hadn't won. At the edge of the jungle, beyond the final checkpoint that once separated the infected territory from the last government-controlled zones, they were met by armed guards in black armor, insignias unfamiliar. Mara raised a hand. We're not infected. We shut down the hive. We need medical evac in. Drop your weapons, the lead soldier barked. The team froze. We're survivors, Crane said carefully. We just saved. I said drop them. The team complied, stunned. Rifles clattered to the ground. From behind the soldiers emerged a man in a pristine white coat, flanked by drones and analysts. His ID badge read, Dr. Lanford, Biocommand Overseer. He smiled politely. Captain Mara Bishop. Dr. Crane. Agent Nix. Sergeant Mendoza. What a surprise to see you alive. You knew? Mara asked, her voice low. We monitored the mission. We even allowed it. You were the final test. Mara's blood ran cold. What test? To see if the core could be shut down by outside interference. And if the infection could truly be severed from its neural source. He adjusted his glasses. And you succeeded. Congratulations. Nix stepped forward, furious. You mean, you used us? No, Lanford said calmly. We used Creed. They were stunned. You let him go in there, Crane said, voice shaking. You knew what he was. He was our most successful prototype. A bridge between human will and the hive. But he was unstable. We needed proof of concept, so we allowed him to sacrifice himself. We monitored everything. Mendoza coughed blood onto the ground. And you didn't send help? Help? Lanford laughed. Why would we risk soldiers when we had you? Guards moved in to collect their gear and check them for traces of psychic contamination. You should be proud, Lanford continued. Thanks to you, the infection is dormant. For now. Mara glared at him. For now? He nodded. The core was only one network. One node. The others lie further south. Across the sea. Underground. In the ruins of places we lost years ago. Crane stepped forward. You want to use the infection, don't you? Control, Lanford said. Not use. If we understand it, we can manipulate it. Repurpose it for warfare, labor, even medical advancement. Creed was just the beginning. Mara snapped. You're mad. This thing nearly ended the world. Nearly, he agreed. But now, thanks to you, it won't. He turned away. Debrief them, scan their memories, then prep for redeployment. They'll be useful again. The guards closed in. And in that moment, Mara made a decision. She spun, grabbed Mendoza's dropped pistol, and fired. One guard down. Nix pulled a blade from her boot and slashed the nearest soldier. Crane tackled the technician reaching for his neural scanner. They didn't try to win. They tried to escape. In the chaos, they dove into the treeline, bullets ripping past them. Lanford shouted for backup, but the jungle swallowed the fugitives. They ran for miles, wounded and breathless. Eventually, they reached an old bunker once used by resistance fighters. There, they regrouped. Nix stitched Mendoza's side with trembling hands. Crane tried to boost a radio signal, but nothing connected. Government channels were encrypted. Mara sat in silence. What now? Crane asked. She looked up. Her eyes were clear. We exposed them. Crane blinked. With what? We have no evidence. Yes, we do, she said. Creed. They stared. His mind is still in the core, she said. Fragments of it. Memories. That blast didn't destroy data, it just severed the link. We go back. We find what's left. We find the truth. Then we tell the world what Biocommand did. What they're still doing. Mendoza groaned. You're talking suicide. No, she said. I'm talking justice. Outside, the jungle was still. But somewhere deep beneath the earth, other hives stirred. Other eyes opened. The outbreak hadn't ended. It had just paused. And Dead America was far from done. Let me know if you'd like a sequel titled Dead America, The Awakening below or something custom based on this storyline.